The Baltimore Ravens offense got back on track on Saturday in the second day of pads. We talk about that. Lamar Jackson bouncing back in his return to practice and so much more coming up next year on this bonus edition of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here, making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day and a part of your day as well. We're free and available on all podcasting platforms. So in video form on YouTube, you can like and subscribe. In audio form, wherever you get your shows, you can listen and follow along as well. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free on LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL. That's LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We're back here, a little Sunday bonus episode. Again, we do have bonus episodes here from time to time on the show. We had one yesterday as well, just going through the latest training camp updates. And I do think it's important to get these live shows and do them because with this Ravens team, you know, one, how important this season is, but two, there have just been already so many storylines. The biggest one being Lamar Jackson and his illness. And we talked about it yesterday of like, what's going on? I said, I'm not panicking about the situation. Everybody's been sick before, right? And that obviously athletes can get sick too. I made that clear. But Lamar returns to practice on Saturday and he excelled and bounced back. So we're going to be talking about the offense getting back on track, notes from practice, Lamar notes, also some offensive line combinations and other tidbits from training camp. So it's so fun to have football in the air, right? We have all this stuff to talk about during that lull period of the offseason. It's like, all right, what are we talking about today? But now we got football back in the air. So let's get into it. The Ravens offense, obviously with Lamar Jackson back, makes sense that, they would have their best day of training camp. I mean, you would hope that they would with Lamar back, and he certainly did. And you have a bunch of people who were there saying Lamar looked engaged, locked in. He looked better. We know that when he was there a couple days ago and he had to leave early, all the reports were, well, he's looking sluggish. He's not looking 100%, this, that, and the other. This was a different type of practice for Lamar. And it was big for him. I think it is big just to get back on the field. Hopefully he's feeling all the way back. Even if he's not, hopefully he's feeling as close to 100% as he can and continues to work through it, but apparently did not have any ill effects throughout the course of practice on Saturday. I think one of the highlights, though, and a bunch of people ended up saying this, was that Lamar ended up, if they lined up and they did a little bit of a drill. I think it was they were down by 5 minutes, 20 left on the clock, 60 yards back. Lamar goes 5 of 6 in that period, and they score with 30 seconds left. Lamar and Nelson Aguilar getting together for a touchdown on that drive. So a little clutch situation there for the Ravens offense, and they excelled. We've heard all training camp so far, still very early in the process, right? But all process about how, the defense, all the secondary members are getting interceptions and the defense looks so dominant. And the defense certainly had those moments today, and Lamar Jackson wasn't perfect. We'll talk about that. But a bounce back was certainly in order with Lamar on the field, and he picked up right where he left off with a bunch of his receivers. So overall, sharp was the reporting by multiple people throughout practice. Did have some interceptions thrown, Marlon Humphrey being the beneficiary of that. So Marlon's having a great training camp so far too. I think that's a really, really big part of this whole thing is like, everybody's wondering about Marlon, and it's like, well, he had a bad year last season compared to his standards. Who is he? Well, to me, I think a lot of that had to do with the injuries. I've been pretty vocal about that. Maybe Marlon's not necessarily like top 5 cornerback conversations anymore right now, but I'd still put him in the top 10 to top 12 with the potential to get back into that top 5 conversation. So I think to me, Marlon honestly goes into the season as a pretty underrated player. It's kind of crazy to think about with a guy of his skill set. But again, he didn't have a great year last season. It was pretty injury-borne. You can tell that he certainly felt the effects of that. Now, I think other notes to kind of go through here in practice, there were a few, but I think one of the big ones that a lot of people were talking about over the course of the day was the fact that, Rashad Bateman was involved again. And that's another huge sign, Rashad continuing. But this is the difference here, right? Lamar and Rashad haven't really been able to connect in training camp, right? Again, Lamar went, 1 for 5, 1 for 6 in his first day back, and then didn't practice for a couple days, and then now is back again. So it's Bateman being involved with Lamar. That's what everybody wants to see, right? Because obviously Bateman doing his thing with Josh Johnson and Devin Leary and whoever, is not Lamar. That's fine. That's great. You still want to have that momentum. But we all know what the key is here. We all know the key is getting Lamar and Rashad Bateman on the same page. And that is the connection we are looking forward to seeing. So it's good to hear that Bateman was involved. Isaiah Likely, Mark Andrews also getting involved. I mean, is that really a surprise, though? Is that really a surprise? We know this passing offense runs through the tight ends. It's not a secret. It's not a shock to anybody. But this is a key thing I'm looking out for this season. And if you're an everydayer, you've heard me say this a lot on this show, but I'm going to keep hammering it home. It's what does the ball look like in terms of being spread out this season? Because I will say what I do say. And again, everydayers are probably annoyed by me saying this, but if your name in this offense, Lamar Jackson, has not been Marquise Brown, Mark Andrews, Zay Flowers, you're probably getting anywhere from 2 to 4 targets per game. The ball has to be spread out a little bit more this season by Lamar when everybody is healthy. When Mark Andrews has gone down the past few seasons, we've seen Lamar kind of spread that ball out a little bit more because obviously we know the connection that Mark and Lamar have together and their ability to play street ball and kind of go off script. Nobody has a connection to Lamar like Mark Andrews does in that regard. But that doesn't mean they can't establish other connections. And I think, to me, him establishing more of a connection with Zay and building off that momentum, the Rashad Bateman connection, the Likely connection too. Now, how do they get more targets to guys? You throw the ball more. And that's the other thing to me, is you got to be a little more balanced this season. This is year 2 of Todd Monken's offense. I expect it to be more balanced this season, but how balanced, right? I think that's the big question here because, as I've said before, they don't have to all of a sudden become a top 10 team in pass attempts. I don't want them to do that. That's not their identity. This is a run-first team, but the split last season of them being the top rushing offense in the league in terms of attempts and the 30th in terms of attempts and passes, you kind of have to shrink that gap a little bit to maybe you're second in rushing attempts and 25th in pass attempts, let's say. Even that, I think, gets the ball spread out a little more targets to go around. Obviously, Odell's targets now up for grabs, a couple other players' targets now up for grabs. And I think what we're going to see a little bit more of this season is out of the backfield, guys contributing. So Derrick Henry catching passes, and when Keaton comes back, him catching passes. But it's good to hear Lamar getting back into a groove. And again, first day back was apparently very, very successful. You also have Tez Walker and Kadir Ismail, who made a couple of plays. Obviously, Kadir's fighting for a roster spot as an undrafted guy, and Tez Walker's fighting for a role in terms of what is his role going to be. But to me, those are those bigger bodied types of players. Now, Kadir is, admittedly, he's admittedly a lot taller than Tez, but to me, Tez is so intriguing. And that's a key thing because imagine, Lamar and Tez getting that connection early. That's going to be big because what I think the Ravens are going to try to do with Tez, and I've said this before, is him as a deep ball receiver is, I think, his best asset for what this team needs. We know that Rashad Bateman and Zay Flowers can be 3-level receivers. We know they have that skill set. But I think if you kind of put Tez in a role of him being that bigger-bodied jump ball, deep ball receiver, that allows Zay and Rashad to work in the short and intermediate parts of the field a little bit more while still having some deep responsibilities. But it allows them to kind of play that role and hone in on that and not be doing too much of everything. So that, to me, I think it's guys having roles where you do have players that can do everything, but sometimes you don't need or even want them to do everything because it can take away from other aspects of their game. So that, to me, is really important, and just Lamar establishing those connections early. Obviously, he gets a little bit of a late start here at training camp, but that, to me, is not overly concerning. Of course, you just hope he's feeling good, feeling better, and his health is good, and they were able to figure out the root cause of whatever it was. Hopefully, he's back for good now, And if he is, he'll be gearing up for what will hopefully be another very, very successful season. Coming up, though, we still have a lot to talk about training camp-wise. We'll get into more notes from Saturday's practice, more notes on Lamar Jackson, and a lot more. Stay tuned, plenty to talk about here in this bonus edition of Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps a ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level up to peak performance, superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has it covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. All the parts you need are the prices you want. It's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. We're back our second segment of Locked On Ravens here on Sunday. Kevin Ostraker here with you on this bonus episode of the show. Really appreciate everybody again being here, making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. Be sure to make your second listen Locked On NFL. I host that show on Monday, so we're getting my recordings in for that today to put out tomorrow. We'll be talking Jordan Love, Tua Tagovailoa, the quarterback situations over there, so be sure to subscribe over on Locked On NFL and listen wherever you get your audio podcasts as well. In addition to Locked On Ravens for your daily Ravens content fix Monday through Friday, of course. And then we have these bonus episodes, and we also go live after every Ravens game and after every piece of Ravens big news. Now, some other notes from Saturday's practice. One, John Harbaugh made it clear that they devoted practice to Jacoby Jones yesterday. It was a nice tribute. Jacoby, obviously, his funeral was held yesterday in New Orleans. He was laid to rest. Multiple players were excused. Staff members were excused to go to New Orleans to be there. That included players like Justin Tucker. Joe Flacco was excused from Colts practice to go down to New Orleans to honor Jacoby. Justin Forsett was there. So obviously Jacoby's loss still hits hard, still hurts. But I know that, again, he made such an impact, and they devoted the practice to him, and they gave out wristbands. They had bandanas with the number 12 on them. So a touching and nice tribute for Jacoby Jones, who obviously made such a big impact both on, but more importantly, off the field for the Baltimore community. So John Harbaugh did touch on that and wanted to make that known. He also talked about an injury that happened in practice yesterday. Again, injuries do happen during training camp, and it was Trayvon Mullen who actually got carted off the field. It said it was a shoulder injury, John Harbaugh said, so he fell on his shoulder, got carted off. Mullen is very talented. He has been just snake bitten with injuries over the course of his career, so hopefully it's nothing serious, but John Harbaugh said they will know more later on that. And then Zay Flowers also was not at practice on Saturday, but he was excused from practice to attend a wedding. So nothing to worry about with Zay. I know, he wasn't announced as practicing and everybody started freaking out, but just go and do a wedding. Kyle Van Noy did not practice for the second straight day with his neck injury, and Joe Evans did not practice as well. So that's about it for the status report on the Ravens and who was there and who was not. But some other news and notes from practice is Lamar Jackson hit Tylan Wallace for a 50-yard touchdown catch and run. And he also, that was in play action, which I think play action is going to be so big. I talk about this. I've talked about it forever, really ever since the Ravens signed Derrick Henry. I think play action is going to be so big for them this year. And, hearing they did this, and here's why. Let's go back to 2019. We are not in 2019 anymore. 2019 is so far in the past. We're almost in 2025, which, by the way, I thought about that today. And I'm just like, oh, we're in 2025? Almost? That crazy to me. Crazy that 2019 was so long ago. But something that made that offense so successful, and again, we're not in that era anymore. It's not Greg Roman's offense. It's Todd Monken's not that personnel group. It's a different team now. But 3 tight end sets were a big key in that. And play action, that was a big key. And so to me, one, when you have Derrick Henry, when you have the personnel to throw out heavy guys and 12 and whatever, and you can run guys out there like that, defenses have to adjust. Defenses have to put out their personnel to combat that. Because if you have heavy personnel, you throw Patrick Ricard in there, you have Derrick Henry in the backfield, and you do 2 wide, let's say, teams have to bring in that personnel, which is not necessarily multiple defensive back packages. It's bringing in your big guys, your inside linebackers, maybe safeties and bigger players. So you can work play action off of that, get one-on-one opportunities. Those guys are going to have to start respecting, because if you do one or the other thing right, defenses have to start respecting it. If they want to crowd the box to stop the run, you work play action over the top of that as guys are creeping up to the line. You send Mark Andrews over the middle of the field. You send Isaiah Likely deep. You get guys running one-on-one against each other. That, to me, is the big part where you can work guys over top of that if guys are creeping up in the box to try to stop Derrick Henry. Now, if you do that and defenses become a little aware of that and they start to back guys off, then you say, all right, now you're not loading the box on us. We're just going to run it down your throat now. So congratulations. You picked your poison. Either way, you picked the poison. And so you can get either over top of the defense with play action. You can confuse them. You can get them razzled. And that, to me, obviously Gus and JK and all those guys, like Gus Edwards, JK Dobbins, they were good in that aspect. But we're not going to sit here and act like they're Derrick Henry, because they're not. Derrick Henry is his own player. Derrick Henry is one of one. Derrick Henry is incredible. And again, in pads, all the reports, we had Nikhil Mehta, who is, covering the Ravens for Russell Street Report, and he's down there in Owings Mills. And this was without pads. We talked to Nikhil, and he's just like, yeah, he's massive. And he also has the foot speed to make up for a lot of other things as well. So going to be really interesting to see how that all works. But I do think play action is uber important for what the Ravens have and what they want to do this season. You don't have to be the 2019 offense. I don't think they should. I'm not asking them to do that. But if you have a guy like Isaiah Likely, you have a guy like Charlie Kohler, obviously you got Mark Andrews, 3 tight end sets. I'm telling you, bring them back and use them. I think it could really work out in their favor. Now, one interesting tidbit here. Michael Pierce talked to the media. Michael Pierce had multiple different tidbits. We'll talk about another one on the final part of the show with some offensive line combination talk that we're going to have, because the offensive line, key part of the Ravens' success this season. But Anthony Weaver, who went to the Dolphins as the defensive coordinator there, and Mike McDonald, who obviously was the Seattle head coach now, both of those guys tried to sign Brent Urban away from the Ravens this offseason. That's what Michael Pierce ended up saying. He and Brent obviously close, and he returned to Baltimore. So both Weaver and the Dolphins and McDonald and Seahawks failed bringing Brent Urban to their teams. Urban decides to return to Baltimore. And I know people look at Brent Urban and they're like, okay, this guy's just a depth piece. Who cares? Urban has actually played more of a role than I think a lot of people realize for the Ravens over these past couple of years since he's been back with the team. He's a guy that obviously, yes, is a veteran, is not necessarily the top defensive lineman you have out of 5 defensive linemen. I would say he's probably your 4th right now, unless Broderick Washington takes a step, then he's your 5th. But he still is a very solid run defender. He can get after the quarterback here and there. And that's valuable as a rotational piece to give guys breathers. And again, I think Travis Jones is going to have a much bigger role this season. I think that's going to be something to watch out for. Urban is a very valuable piece. And I think, to me, with this Ravens defensive line group with Matabike, Jones, Urban, Pierce, and Washington, first of all, again, it's my favorite group on this roster. I think it's the perfect mix of veteran and young talent. But they do need everybody to step up in that room, but their skill sets complement each other really, really well. And I think for Michael Pierce, he's a player that the Ravens, and I mean Urban as well, they're going to want to probably manage those guys' snaps a little more this season, considering they're getting up there in age and they're not, 25 anymore, but they can still be very effective. And obviously Pierce was pleased that Brent Urban decided to come back to Baltimore and spend another year with him in that defense. So it's going to be exciting. I think the Ravens have a lot up their sleeve, a lot brewing. Obviously, I think the vibes are kind of back with Lamar back at practice and everything that's going on with him. So just kind of onward and upward. And again, we're almost in August now, which signals preseason football. We actually have, crazy, August 1st is the Hall of Fame game. So that's going to be really, really exciting. Coming up, though, in the final part of the show, we'll talk about the offensive line, the combinations, how important it is for guys to get off to a fast start, and could there be a surprise starter or two on the offensive line? Stay tuned. We got a lot to get to here on the show. First, the show is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools you have to find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. I've had a ton of great experiences over on LinkedIn, whether it's finding jobs, connecting, networking. LinkedIn is the place to be. LinkedIn isn't just a job board, though. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else. Even those who aren't actively searching for a new job might be open to the perfect role. And to give it a month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time and resources to hire. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post a job for free on LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL. That's LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL to post a job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We're back. Our final segment, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Allstriker still here, rounding out the weekend with you on this Sunday with a bonus episode. Really appreciate all the support I've gotten on the show and on the channel over the years here. Obviously, we started this up in audio form, we then moved to video form as well, and we just hit 7,000 subscribers on YouTube about a month ago. So we're on that road to 8K. If you want to be a part of that journey, hit that subscribe button. Of course, always appreciate it. And then audio form coming up on our 5-year anniversary, at least my 5-year anniversary on this show. So coming up in August, which is crazy that we're almost in August already. I mean, the months are just flying by here. Almost to football. Really exciting times. But let's talk about the offensive line a little bit more, because I know the Ravens, one of the big storylines of the offseason is they did lose 60% of their starting offensive line, 3 starters. John Simpson, Kevin Zeitler, Morgan Moses, all out the door, different opportunities. Now, the Ravens didn't necessarily go out there and sign a bunch of, proven veteran talent that can go and replace those guys. They're going to undergo a bit of a youth movement where the projected starting line, as it stood heading into training camp, was probably something along the lines, and we had said this, of Ronnie Stanley, Andrew Voorhees, Tyler Linderbaum, Ben Cleveland, Roger Rosengarten. Well, how it's panned out in training camp so far, it's been, those first 3, Stanley, Voorhees, and Linderbaum. But Daniel Fele has been getting a lot of reps at right guard. And then Patrick McCary has been getting reps as well at tackle, although I still expect Roger Rosengarten to be the starter week 1. I mean, John Harbaugh essentially admitted that, yeah, you know what? McCary's going to be, he's valuable, very valuable as the super sub 6th offensive line, which I've been saying for a while now. I mean, and everybody knows it, right? It's no secret. But the Fele aspect of things here is really important. Those guard spots. And obviously right tackle as well with Rosengarten and just how he ends up faring during his rookie season. But Fele at guard is an interesting one. And John Harbaugh ended up talking about it. He said they're going to give it a shot and see how it looks with Fele. Said he has good feet for his size. He's a big man, but he can move his feet and he can bend, create leverage, and coming off the ball, getting the combo blocks, getting out into space. That's big as well. So, he's working on using his hands, and, you got to get your hands up quicker when things are happening faster. So there are some areas for him to improve, but this is an interesting one. And again, it kind of signals to me like what's going on with Ben Cleveland. It feels like, I don't know, if Ben Cleveland can't win a starting job here out of training camp, I think this is his last year in Baltimore. And, it's not really a question of that for me. It's just Cleveland has been pretty disappointing over the course of his career. I know he has had moments and he has looked good in moments as well, but it always seems like we're talking about Cleveland as like, oh, could he take over this job? Would he take over that job? And then it's either a question about his work ethic or performance or whatnot. So I don't really know what's going on with Cleveland, but Fele getting the majority here of the praise from John Harbaugh. So that's going to be big for them, and literally, Fele literally big because he's that big of a guy. But imagine having a guy like Daniel Fele as a guard. I mean, his body frame is unreal. And you have a guy like that pulling out into space and doing all that and improving every day. I mean, Fele, just for reference on what he actually is in terms of height and weight, it's actually a little crazy if we're being honest. He's 6'8", 379. At least that's what he's listed at right now. So that guy running at you as a guard, that guy lining up as a guard, it's a little scary for defenses. Now, obviously, he has to use that size and his strength to his advantage. If he doesn't, it's not that scary, but for defenses. But just the pure size would be huge. But the Rosengarten aspect of things is going to be interesting as well. Rosengarten, on the contrary to Fele, is a little bit smaller for, his position. And it will probably give him some issues early on in his career, just against maybe more powerful rushers, bigger rushers. And that's to be expected here. And it's the same thing with Nate Wiggins, where I think with both of those guys, a full NFL offseason. So after this year, a full NFL offseason will probably do them well in terms of just getting stronger and getting them to where the Ravens want them to be with that full plan. But for Rosengarten, he's only 6'5", 310. So that's 3 less inches than, and Fele is big in general, right? But 3 less inches than Fele, and then about what, like 30 pounds-ish, 40 pounds-ish lighter. So he is on the lighter side, as on the smaller side, but the Ravens, they like his foot speed. He has the track record in pass protection. He can get on the space. He's mobile. He has a lot of good traits, but I would expect him to, again, it's with all these guys, right? It's not just a Rosengarten thing. Like the Chiefs might be starting Kingsley Suamataia in week 1, and that's a rookie. The Ravens actually chose Rosengarten over Suamataia, and guess what? If Suamataia ends up outperforming Rosengarten in week 1, those conversations will be ugly, especially if the Ravens lose. But Rosengarten is a product of what Todd Monken wants on his offensive line, because I've said this before. If you're an everyday, you've heard me say it before. But when Todd Monken inherited Greg Roman's offense, obviously, he wanted to change it up, but he inherited the pass catching weapons. He inherited the quarterback. He inherited the running backs, whatever. But the offensive line, right? That was a Greg Roman offensive line. Monken wanted to get younger and more athletic there, as is the reason why he didn't bring in all these different, re-signing Zeitler, re-signing Moses, or, keeping Moses, I guess, re-signing Simpson. We knew there was something like this coming, and part of that reason is because we know they wanted to get younger and more athletic on their line. So doesn't mean Zeitler's not a heck of a player. Doesn't mean Moses is still really solid when he's not, when he's healthy. But the issue is he was not healthy, and I think the Ravens had injury concerns. But the other part of this, and this is the good part, and this is another thing that Michael Pierce ended up talking about as well, is Andrew Voorhees has apparently looked the part, and reports coming out of camp saying he's looked really good. Michael Pierce saying he's looked really good. And I know there were some comments, I forget, there were a couple of people saying that Voorhees kept getting beat in practice. Apparently that was one-on-ones with Michael Pierce. And guess what? Michael Pierce wins a lot of his one-on-ones. It's because he's super strong and super big. But other than that, Voorhees has been apparently nothing short of spectacular in camp so far. Michael Pierce, he was asked about, the competition on the offensive line, how that's working out. And he ended up saying Voorhees is going to be really good. So singled out Voorhees, not even prompted, right? The question was about the offensive line in general, and Pierce singled out Voorhees non-prompted. So that's a good sign. Voorhees was going to be a 3rd, 4th round pick if he was healthy. It was just about bouncing back and how the knee would respond, because it's different for everybody, right? Obviously, with modern medicine and technology, recoveries for ACLs, Achilles injuries, those processes have been sped up, and the success rate, whether it's football, basketball, baseball, hockey, soccer, whatever it may be, the success rate for athletes coming back from those, what used to be devastating career-ending injuries a lot of the time, or career-altering, guys can bounce back from that a little bit easier and a little bit quicker now. And it seems like Voorhees is certainly doing that. So I'd expect, that one's a shoe and no-brainer for me. He's probably going to win that job, and, he's cementing it in camp right now. Rosengarten, I'm pretty sure, is going to win the right tackle job over a guy like McCary, because I think they like him in the 6th spot, the do-it-all player that can slide in on any 5. And the reason for that, by the way, just in case people haven't heard me say this before, is because it's easier to do a 1-for-1 swap than a 2-for-1. You're moving guys around. If Tyler Linderbaum gets injured, and again, knock on wood, that does not happen, you can just move McCary in for Linderbaum, and that's it. 1-for-1, backup for starter, and that's it. If, Stanley gets injured, hopefully, again, that does not happen, you can move McCary in for Stanley. That's 1-for-1. If McCary's playing let's just say McCary's playing right guard, right? Let's say he wins the right guard competition. Let's say he wins the right tackle. He's starting the right tackle right now. Let's say he wins the right tackle competition. And then let's say Voorhees goes down. And you think, okay, McCary's the best guy to go over there, and then we'll plug whoever. You got to move McCary over, and then you got to move somebody else in. That's 2-for-1. Whereas if he's a backup, it's just 1-for-1. So hopefully you follow me there. I know I was moving McCary all around the offensive line in my scenario, but guess what? He does that anyway. So I guess it's kind of fitting for what happens. The offensive line is going to be so key. Again, you got to protect your quarterback, got to open up rushing lanes for your running backs. So hopefully they're able to figure it out, and the offensive line can get something going and keep momentum for the entire season. That's all I have here today, though, on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in. Coming up tomorrow, I'll be back here for regularly scheduled programming, starting another week here of Locked On Ravens. So be sure to like and subscribe here on YouTube. Follow along here in audio form as well. I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.